Hi, beautiful people. How are you doing? Let me just put my light on. Oh my gosh, that's a bit bright, isn't it? Let's see. Do I like that one? Let's just try this one. Oh, that's a bit cold. Let's try. Oh, that's a bit yellow. Or bit. Well, maybe I quite like that one. Going through all the different lights I've got here on my camera light. Anyway, hi, it's Shakti here. How are you doing? I am coming on live to make this little video, which is kind of the opposite to the theme of one I did recently, which was all about how I lost a friend because I wasn't competent at the time. And this is no judgment or blame of myself, but like I just through kind of not holding a boundary for myself with clarity, really as a result of that, I lost a friend. And we're still on the theme of boundaries and consent because it's a really important theme that I'm continuing to work with. And this is, again, a real life story from my life, which kind of reflects the other way around, how I lost a really good friend because I did hold my boundaries. And so it's just an illustration of, I guess, the teaching of the story is, before I've even told it, that when we begin to honor our boundaries and speak our no, that not everyone's going to like it. And that could mean that people leave our lives, that we lose relationships even. Sometimes that's going to happen when we speak our no. And it's, you know, it's unfortunate, but that's a possible consequence of coming into alignment and beginning to speak your truth and hold your boundaries and communicate clearly. So here's the story, and feel free to chip in with any questions or comments as I go along. And it doesn't even have to be that long, actually, but I just was kind of guided to share the story today. So I had what I would consider one of my closest female friends, actually. We were very close for many years, sharing all kinds of intimacies and being there for one another through good times and bad times, and particularly through the challenges of single parenting. We were both single parents living close by one another, and this friendship meant a great deal to me. Like I say, I would consider this person to have been one of the closest female friends I had, and one of the closest friends I had. We lived close by, we were phoning a lot, we were texting a lot, we would see each other a lot throughout the weeks. And there was a little bit of a pattern that then began to crop up. But to cut a very long story short, there was a moment where this friend asked me, rather than asking me, told me that if I fraternized with another female who had dated her ex, she would no longer be my friend. So basically the statement was couched in terms of, if you become friends with this woman, I will not be friends with you. And you don't really need to know the details. It's not, in my opinion, relevant, but this was a woman who had dated her ex and was no longer dating her ex, and that was that. So my response to that was, no. No. You cannot tell me who I can be friends with and who I cannot be friends with. That doesn't work for me. That's a hard boundary. That's a no. I will be friends with whoever I choose to be friends with. That is that. And the friend of mine then had a huge reaction to that. That was quite actually aggressive, verbally and energetically. And it was upsetting. It was, it was upsetting. It was upsetting to be on the receiving end of that. And even so, I also then went back into some of my old people-pleasing behaviours, trying to appease, trying to bring peace to the situation. I'm a Libran, so like I'm all about harmony, conciliation, mediation, peace, seeing it both sides to every story, you know. So I'm a natural peacemaker, and you know, was seeking to do that, and it didn't work. But in holding to my truth and holding to my integrity, I wasn't going to budge on my boundary, which is nobody gets to tell me who I hang out with and who I don't hang out with. That is my choice. You know, that's not meaning any offense to anyone, but it is me being in alignment with my truth. And so that friend who I'd known very closely for, I don't know, 8 years maybe, walked out of my life, and I have not heard from her since. And I had to grieve the loss of that friendship. You know, it left a gap, it left a hole in my life. Suddenly there wasn't this person that I could phone, that I could text, that I could share things with. And I had to really grieve that. And I also reached out. I reached out to say, I love you, I'm always here. You know, there's no hard feelings at all on my side. There never were, and still aren't. But that person has never come back into my life. So, you know, I had to really grieve the loss of what had been a very close friendship, and get used to living in integrity. Meant that sometimes I was lonely. Sometimes I wasn't aligned with other people. But the calling, not the compulsion, that's not the right word, but the spiritual necessity of being true to myself was stronger than anything else. And so I guess really just wanting to share that when we begin to own our yes and own our no fully and hold those boundaries, you know, it's not always plain sailing. It can sometimes lead to the loss of relationships. Yeah. Is there anything else I want to say about that? I guess it did also make me question the nature of what that relationship had actually been about as well. But really, you know, I have nothing bad to say about the other person. I actually genuinely only have love and compassion in my heart, for both of us. And it does feel, through the ongoing practice of this, you know, which has been for many years and still growing and still deepening and still learning, that the quality and caliber of my friendships has become better in terms of an equality of giving and taking, an equality of listening and asking, an equality of time and energy given and taken. And I looking back would say that some of my past relationships, both romantic but also with women, there was probably an imbalance where I was giving more than I was getting, and where I was falling into that role of being the unofficial counselor or listener. And as I began to clean up my act around that old pattern of being the mediator, the counselor, the listener, and actually giving my energy away in that way, those kinds of connections began to fall away, and the nature of the people who are close to me has changed into a much, I would say, healthier and more balanced dynamic, where my energy and my presence, I would say, are more honoured, and that is because I am honouring my energy and my presence more. It's as simple as that. And it requires radical honesty with the self to see those codependent aspects of the self that perhaps want to sometimes hold on to a connection, even though it's not meeting you on every level, or it's actually got a, it's not fully balanced or sustaining. The codependent part that can hold on to that out of familiarity, out of laziness, out of fear of being alone. So I had to face the fear of, well, I actually wasn't afraid of being alone, but I then was experiencing periods of loneliness in not immediately having anybody as close to me around, and then having to cultivate that, being okay with aloneness with myself very strongly, very deeply, and then choosing who is in my life, choosing who I relate to, not from a codependent, needy place, but from a place of self-love and equality, and staying in my truth throughout, come what may. So not choosing my responses so as to fit in, or not choosing my responses so as to please, or not choosing my responses out of some unconscious fear of then being left behind, or whatever it might be. So that is also part of this path. Yeah, and I'm just reading this comment. If they left because you said no, they were not a true friend in the first place. There is an element of that I can see. Like I say, it did make me question the friendship. But, so yeah, I think there is an element of truth in that, and the nature of the relationship was probably slightly codependent, perhaps even a little bit narcissistic. However, I also, with absolute compassion in my own heart for myself and this other person and all of us, recognize that that kind of behavior stems from conditioning and trauma, and a lack of capacity in that moment to bring awareness to one's own behavior, and to notice what's actually going on there. We all heal and develop and grow at different paces and different speeds and in different ways. But certainly that kind of dynamic is now no longer part of my life at all. And it is, a very manipulative, immature way of behaving. And that's just not in my sphere anymore at all. So that's my story for today. And I guess that's, again, it's a lead in to those of you who might be interested in coming to my next round of the course that I'm doing online on boundaries and consent, called Just Say No, which is for all of you women out there who have struggled or who still struggle to say no when you really want to, and to say yes when you really want to, and who recognize the importance of owning your boundaries and your limits, and not just owning them, but communicating them, because one part is knowing them, which comes from being in the body, right? But the next part is then being able to communicate your boundaries and your limits and your requests clearly, powerfully, simply. And it's a practice, and it is not, for most people I know, this is not how we are taught to communicate. It's not how we're taught to relate. It's not what's been modeled for us. So it does require learning, and it does require practice. So if you'd like to come along, the next round of this online course is July the 22nd, which is a Saturday, and it's 10 a.m. in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. That's UK time, online on Zoom. Had amazing feedback from the first round. And I do record it, so if you sign up and you can't make it, then you get the recording. However, there's a couple of women took the course, took the replay from the first round, and one of them wants to now take it live, because even though she said she got a ton out of watching the replay, she knows she's going to get even more from watching it live, because then you get to interact with me. And, you know, it's very, very unique. Each person will show up with particular issues that are going on in their lives that pertain to this theme. And then I can give you individual, you know, just for you responses. And everybody learns from that. And so, you know, I really love that when we can go into the unique challenges that everybody has, and yet see the generic patterns that are playing out and learn. So the information for that workshop's in this group, and I'll also put the link below in case you can't find it. And reach out if you've got any questions. Look forward to seeing you. Lots of love, everybody.